In this example, we'll be taking a look at how to create the vectors to build the Gothic Quatrefoil you see on the screen. We'll be shown a range of vector creation tools such as merge, subtract, trim and edit curves to create the complex shapes. We will also be demonstrating how to use layers to better organise complex arrangements of vectors. So let's start by creating a new job. So we'll go to File, New, and we're going to start with a single-sided setup, and the width is going to be 30 inches, the height 12 inches, and we're going to have a material thickness of 1 inch. We'll zero from the material surface, and our XY datum position in this case is going to be from the centre. Okay, so now we've got our workspace created, we can start looking at creating some vectors for the quatrefoil. But before we do anything else, let's just check over our layer structure. So at the moment we've got layer 1, which was created automatically when we set up a new job. And because we're starting by creating the outline of our quatrefoil, we're going to rename this to outline. So if you just click on layer 1, and then press enter to accept. And then if we just click off, you'll see that outline is now the current active layer. So the first thing that we're going to place on this outline layer is the outline rectangular vector. So if we come into the draw rectangle tool, and in this case we're going to have our anchor point in the center of the screen, so 0, 0. We've got 3 different options in corner type here. So we've got square, radius external, and radius internal. So in this case, we're going to opt for a square corner, and we're going to set the size with a width of 27 inches and a height of 10.5 inches. And then we can just click create and close out the form. So now we've got our outline on the outline layer, we're going to want to look at creating the top and bottom grooves for our quatrefoil. So with that, we're just going to come back up to the layers menu, and we're just going to choose this option to add a new layer, and this one's going to be called top and bottom grooves. And again, we'll just make sure that that's the active layer, so you can see that highlighted. And again, we can come across to the draw rectangle tool under create vectors, and this time, instead of selecting our parameters in the size section, we're going to left mouse click in the corner of the existing rectangle, drag it out to the other corner to specify our X value, and then with the left mouse button held down, we're then going to specify 0.5 by typing that in, and then Y to indicate that that's the Y value, and then that will have created a rectangle using the existing dimensions of the previous rectangle for the X, and the value that we've typed in for the Y. So now that's been created, we can close out of that form, and with this smaller rectangle still selected, we need to move this upwards by 3/8 of an inch. And we can do that by coming across to the Transform Objects menu and selecting the first option, Move Selected Objects. And we're going to move that relative to its current position, and we're going to move it up in Y 3/8 of an inch. So we can specify that by typing 3/8, hit the equals, and then you'll get the decimal of 0.375. So we click apply, and then we can close out the form. And now we've created our bottom groove, we now need to look at creating the same on the top part of our design. So instead of repeating the same process in the top corner, what we can do is use the mirror selected objects under Transform Objects, with that still selected, and we're going to want Flip About Job Center selected, create a mirrored copy so that it doesn't just move that and delete the existing vector. And in this case, we're going to want to flip that vertically. So if we just select that, and now you can see that the second groove has been created. So now with those 3 shapes created, we can review our layers. So we've got the outline on its own layer and the top and bottom grooves on their own layer. So we can switch those off and on, and also the outline off and on. So we can see we've got a logical structure for this from the outset. which will make organising this job much easier. And with that, we can create a new layer for our next shape and call that foils. And again, that's the selected active layer. And so that we can just focus in on this layer, we can go ahead and switch off the other two layers, leaving the new blank layer ready to start creating the shapes for our foils. So to do that, we need the Create Vectors menu again, and this time we're going to use the Draw Circle command. And the same as last time, we're going to want our center point to be in the middle of the material, so 0, 0, and our diameter is going to be of 1.5 inches. And now we've created that from our reference point, I know that I'm going to want to move that down by 2/3 of an inch. So if we come over to the Transform Objects, Move Selected Objects again, and we're going to want to move it in Y. So we can enter -2/3, hit equals, and then apply. And that will have moved it down by 2/3 of an inch. And with that now created, we're going to need an additional 2 circles overlapping the existing circle to form the basis of the quatrefoil shape. So to do that, under Offset and Layout, we're going to use the Circular Copy tool. And the first thing we're going to want to do in this form is change where the rotation center is. So I'm going to double click on the center there, and that will draw the center of rotation in the middle of the screen. And we're going to want 3 copies altogether, including the existing circle. And our rotation angle will be through 360 degrees, and then we can click copy and close. And now we have that created, we know that we only require the outline vectors of this complete shape, so the internal overlapping sections can be removed, and we can do this by using the Weld tool under Edit Objects. So we'll click into that, and you'll see that that's removed all of the internal overlapping sections, and it's just left the perimeter outline of the 3 circles. So the next thing that we need to do is create the internal shape of our quatrefoil. So to do this, we're going to come over to Offset and Layout, and using the Offset tool, we're going to want to choose inwards in this case, so it's inside the existing vector, and we're going to offset by a distance of just 0.25 inches. And then we come down to these 3 options here. So we have Create Sharp Offset Corners. So if I just leave that deselected for now and click Offset, you'll see that the shape created has these rounded edges that we don't actually need in this case. So I'm going to redo that now with Create Sharp Offset Corners selected. We're also going to want to keep the original shape, so delete original, deselected, and we'll select new, so the new vector created is the active object. And there you can see the difference with these sharp corners compared to the rounded edges with their Create Sharp Offset Corners deselected. Okay, so I'm just going to close out of that now and press Zoom Active View to draw in limits. And now we're just going to create the center of our trifoil. So the XY is going to be 0, 0 again, and the diameter is going to be 1.25. And you can see that created in the center of the screen. So if we just zoom in, we're now going to weld the circle with the center of our trifoil. So if we select both objects, and we're going to use the same weld command to weld those 2 together and get the shape that you see on the screen. And now with that done, it's now time to start building some of the larger circles. So I'm going to come over to the Draw Circle command again. And this time, instead of specifying the parameters in the form, I'm going to grow this out from the center. And you can stop this at any point, but we can use the keyboard commands as well. So I'm going to put 7.5 and then D for diameter. And that's now created a circle with a diameter of 7.5 inches. And the center point was at the first click of the mouse. Now we've got our first circle created, we now need to look to copy this to the left-hand side first. So we'll look at another method of doing this. So if we first come under File Operations, Copy, to copy that shape, and then we're going to use the Move Selected Objects again, and it'll be relative to its current position. And we're going to enter -9 in X. Click apply, and you'll see that that's moved the whole object over, and then we can use the paste button to paste the original back in. And now we're going to want to create a line connecting these two circles at the top. So we'll use the draw polyline tool, and we'll move the cursor down to snap to that point there, so it's at a tangent, and then snap to that second point. And with that basic shape, we now want to move our trifoil central to these two outer edges of the circles, and also midway between the underside of the line here and the center point here. So to move these objects all together, it's easier to group them first of all by selecting the objects, using a right mouse click, and then scrolling down in the list to group objects. So if we select those again, you'll see that both of those inner and outer parts of the trifoil are now one object. And now I'm going to place this in the center between the two circles. So if we just double click to put that into transform mode, and then we're going to left mouse click in the center point. And if we just hover the mouse over that point there on the outer edge of the right circle, and that point there on the left circle, and then move it back, you'll see the cursor change to indicate the center point. We can just drop that there. And now we need to move that shape up to the top. So to do that, if we zoom in slightly and just pick the top edge of that shape and just moving it up to meet the line, you'll see that that snaps to the edge of the line there, and then we can let that go, and that is perfectly central, halfway between the two circles and flush with the top. And with that done, the next stage now is to start making some modifications to our circles, to start filling in some of the pieces towards the edge of our central trifoil. And first of all, we can actually ungroup these objects now. So if we right click again and back down onto ungroup objects this time, and we're going to want to choose ungroup back onto original objects layer. So we click that, and you can see they're now two separate objects again. And now we're going to look to offset the two circles and the outside edge of the trifoil. So back over to offset. And the distance we're going to want this time by 0.375, and they're going to be offset outwards. And offset those, and now we've got that shape, we can close out the form. And the last step in this stage is just to add in an extra line. So using the polyline tool again, I'm just going to put a line between these two sections of the circle here. Just snap into the points. Then we're going to start looking at trying to get rid of some of the unwanted lines here. So to do that, we're going to use the interactive trim tool, which is under edit objects. So we'll enter into that, and then just hovering the cursor over the vectors that we want to cut away, you'll see that the scissors will open up, indicating that you can cut those away. So we'll just go ahead and do that. Just come across and take these guidelines away here. And what we're trying to do here is leave these two triangular pieces and the tapered shape here, so we can just take away this piece and just these centre bits. And now we've got the three pieces that we were looking to isolate from that. So we'll just close out to the interactive trim. And now we want to create a mirrored copy of this shape here. So to do that, we're going to need to take out this centre line so that we can successfully copy it. So I'm going to select the object, hit N on the keyboard to put that into the node editing mode, and hovering the cursor over the span that you're looking to delete, you can either right click, delete span, or alternatively you can just press D on the keyboard. But before we actually mirror these across, I'm going to want to move these three shapes and place them onto a new layer called vcarve layer. So to do that, instead of using the previous method, we can also right click, move to layer, and then choose new layer. And you'll see this dialog box appear, so you can enter the layer name. So we're going to call that vcarve shapes. And we're going to want to keep that visible, but we still want the foils layer to be active, so we'll leave that unchecked. So now we're going to want to select the two trifoil shapes and these three shapes around the edges. To do that, without selecting the circles, we can box pick from left to right. So it will only pick up whole shapes, anything within the area of the selection box. And then to mirror that, we're going to come back over to mirror selected objects. Make sure flip about job center is on. Create mirrored copy is also selected, and we're going to flip that vertically. And with that section completed, we can just close out, just review quickly our layers again. So you can see the vcarve shapes layer that we created just a second ago. So we can switch that off and those vcarve shapes will disappear, and then we've got the foils on a separate layer. So with everything in the correct places on the layers, we can move on to the next stage. Okay, so for the next part, we're going to start duplicating some of these shapes that we see on the screen. So first of all, we're going to move these two shapes to the left-hand side of the left circle. But before we do that, we're going to create a mirror line that we're going to put down the center of the circle. And now I've got that, I'm then going to pick the two items that I want to mirror, and next the line that we want to mirror around as the third object selected. And then when we go into the mirror selected objects, this time instead of having flip about job center switched off, we're going to deselect that so that it mirrors around the third object that we've selected. Again, we're going to create a mirrored copy, and this time we're going to flip about the line. So that's looking great, and now we've done that, we can then delete that line. And now the next stage is to mirror all of the objects apart from the center circle over to the right hand side. But just before we do that, we're going to have to join these two objects here together. So to do that, we're going to select them both. And this time if we come over to Edit Objects, Join Open Vectors, we've got a low tolerance set already, and you can see that it's already picked up one closed vector after joining. So if we then go ahead and do that, that's joined that together as one vector. Now we've done that, we can close out, go back into full screen again, and I'm just going to box pick from left to right again, all of those items, and now we're going to want to mirror them over to the right hand side. So again, going into mirror selected objects, we're going to flip about the job center this time. We need a mirrored copy again, and we're going to want to flip this one horizontally. And now we've done that, the finished quatrefoil design's taking shape, so just click off. And now we just need to start building the center of our central circle, which we can then copy out to the other two. I'll select that now, and we're going to come into offset again. We're going to want to offset inwards, first of all by 0.25, and we'll have select new checked. So that's selected the new vector created, and then we're going to want to come in again by a further 3/8 of an inch. So 3/8 equals offset. And within that, we're going to create a quatrefoil. So the same as these trifoil shapes, but with 4 circles welded together. First of all, using the draw circle again, we're going to click into the center and we're going to grow that out until we reach 3 inches in diameter. So the center point was where the first clip was, and the diameter was where I'd released the left mouse button. So we're done with the draw circle, so we can move this up now until it meets the top of the inner circle. Double click on that, hover the cursor over the top edge, and then we can drag that up until it meets that point there, and then release. And now we want 4 copies of this circle, including the original. So we're going to go back over to the circular copy tool. Number of items 4 this time. Set the center of rotation. And once again, we're going to go through a full 360 degrees and we can press copy. And after that, we can then look to take out this center part, leaving just the perimeter like we did with these trifoils. So we could use the weld command again, but just to show you, you can also use the interactive trim and just snip away these edges until the internal vectors have gone and you're left with just the perimeter. But of course we don't need this shape where the vectors crossed over in the middle, so we can select that and delete. Now we've got that shape, we're going to need to do some further offsetting. So select the new shape, back into the offset command, and we're going to want to offset inwards again, this time by 1/4 of an inch, and offset inwards. Moving on to the last part of our central design, which is a circle with a diameter of 3.75. Once again, we can grow that out from the center, and using the keyboard commands, enter 3.75, D for diameter, and then let go. And to trim away these edges, we can use the weld command again. So Selecting both objects, just move over to the weld button, hit that once, and you can see it's then trimmed the outer vector to the border of the inner vector, which essentially gives you this radius edge to the inside of the quatrefoil. And one of the final things that we need to do here is just look at the outer edge points of the quatrefoil and offset that one outwards again. So with that selected, over to offset and layout, we're going to offset it outwards this time by 0.375. And then close the form down, and I'm just going to move this selected vector that we've just created and the innermost circle, and we're just going to move that to another layer. So we're going to move that onto the vcarve shapes layer. To check that, we come back up to the layers menu. We can switch off the foils layer. That leaves the vcarve shapes layer, and you can see that that's now been moved across. So if we do the opposite, switch vcarve shapes off, switch on foils, and you can see that it's no longer present on the foils layer. And now with the vcarve shapes layer, your active layer, we're now going to want to create the vcarve shapes for the internal quatrefoil. So to do that, instead of using the interactive trim tool this time, we can select both objects, and coming back over to the edit objects menu again, next to the weld function is subtract, which will effectively subtract the second selected vector from the first. So if we do that, and that leaves you with the 4 defined vcarve corner shapes that we were after. That's looking good. And just coming back up now to switch back on the foils layer, you can see that the centerpiece for this design is now complete. But we now need to repeat that in the 2 circles either side. So to do that, we're now going to box pick from right to left all of the shapes that we need. And with those selected, we're just going to click once to put that into transform mode. And instead of using the create mirrored copy tool this time, what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold Control down on the keyboard, drag from the center point, move it out to the left hand circle, which will snap to the center. And you can see by holding down Control, it's actually preserved that copy. And then I can do the same. So with that selected, holding Control, move it over to the right hand side. And now that completes this part of the design. So now we can go back up to our layers tab, switch back on the top and bottom grooves and the outline. And you can see now that we've got quite a complex shape, made much simpler to create by using tools such as offsetting, subtracting and trimming. So it just goes to show what can be achieved with the drawing tools in just a short space of time within the software. Following on from this, there is a further tutorial which looks at the 2.5D toolpathing. So to save this away to be accessed later, we can now go up to File, Save As. And we're going to save that now as the Gothic Quatrefoil vector drawing.crv. And that's now ready for toolpathing at a later point.